Good morning. Okay. Welcome to the May 27th Board of Police Commissioners meeting. We acknowledge that we are on traditional lands of Treaty 4 territory, a treaty signed with 35 First Nations across southern Saskatchewan and parts of Alberta and Manitoba, and the original lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. The city of Regina owes its strength and vibrancy to these lands and diverse Indigenous people whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory, as well as the settlers from around the world who continue to be welcomed here and call Regina home. As part of today's agenda, the board secretary has informed me that Anastasia Dubius has taken the oath of office and would like to welcome Commissioner Dubius to the board. I hope I got your name correct. Thank you. Welcome aboard. All right, let's roll through the agenda. The first item is approval of public agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the public agenda? Thank you. I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, hearing none, carried. Next item is approval of minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting held on April 29th, 2025? Thank you. Any errors or omissions? I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? Right, carried. All right, our first report for today is PO 25-11. Acting Chief Davis, could you please introduce the report?
Good morning. Yes, you bet. And welcome, Commissioner Dubois. Good to have you on the board. We have a very fulsome agenda today, which I'm sure there's a big steep learning curve, but I know that you'll be a fantastic addition to the board. So in relation to the first report, actually last week it was just in the news that CERT had completed a report on the in-custody death that we had had back in August of 2023, where someone who was in our detention unfortunately passed away while in our custody. And so when that happened, our staff sergeant who was in charge down there at the time, Pierre Beauchesne, began looking and doing research about what could we do differently in order to stop this from happening in the future. So through a bunch of work between Staff Sergeant Beauchesne and Mr. Matthew Carlton, we introduced biometrics. So biometrics have been in place now for 1 year, and so we'll be providing an update to the board and to the public about that. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Matthew Carlton. He's our business systems analyst, and Staff Sergeant Dave Kleiman, who is the Staff Sergeant in charge of Central Services for Support Services Division, who oversees our detention unit, and they are going to provide us an update on the biometric monitoring in our detention facility.
Is historically we have staffed our detention facility with 3 sworn members, 24-hour coverage, 4 shifts. In 2020, we contracted with a company providing primary care paramedic support, and we started having a full-time paramedic in our detention facility for night shifts only. That was very well received, and in 2022, we moved the paramedic to full-time coverage 24/7, 365. In August 2023, we had that in-custody death that Chief Davies just spoke about. In September 2023, we implemented the Guard One pipe system, which is an electronic cell check solution. Every prisoner, every detainee is checked on face-to-face, in person, every 15 minutes. This was simply the implementation of an electronic system to document those cell checks. In 2024, just over a year ago, we equipped 10 cells with biometric monitoring sensors out of our 34 cells. So currently 10 of our 34 cells have biometric monitoring. So there are some common risk factors that could lead to an in-custody death. Severe alcohol intoxication or withdrawals, suicide, drug overdose, severe withdrawals, or poor health or medical history, or more commonly, a combination thereof. We deal with a very vulnerable segment of society in our detention facility. People under the influence of drugs and alcohol are admitted and triaged through our facility on a daily basis. Again, every person in our detention facility is checked on face-to-face every 15 minutes. Biometrics provides another layer of protection with real-time monitoring of each detainee. The biometrics monitoring detects an abnormal increase or an abnormal decrease in the heart rate or respiratory rate of a detainee, as well as their movement. If you look at the picture at the top of this slide, this is what our officers might see as they walk by a cell. The person on the right is covered in a blanket. Sometimes the detainees even cover themselves with a mattress. They may look okay as we walk by, but a person who may appear to be sleeping may actually be in medical distress. This is where the implementation of biometrics is being very useful for us. On the right side of the slide, you can see a schematic of the device that monitors the biometrics of each detainee, and it uses radar technology. It's affixed to the top of the cell. It doesn't touch the detainee at all. On the bottom, you see the dashboard, which our officers that are working in detention as well as our paramedics see. In the example below, you can see that 6 cells in white are unoccupied. 3 detainees are in biometric cells and are displaying normal vital signs. And then adult male cell number 22 is showing to be an alarm. If we see an alarm like that, we respond immediately to the cell. And so it provides us that very quick response to a possible emergency. So some benefits that we're seeing in the first year: we're detecting medical distress earlier. We've had to hire no additional staff in order to implement this, implement biometrics. We are able to detect the biometrics through clothes, blankets, or under mattresses. A privacy impact assessment was completed, and we are maintaining privacy compliance. We regularly use customized alerts. Our paramedics are able to change those alerts based on medical conditions of each detainee. We have of detailed post-incident analytics should an incident in our detention facility occur. And we're seeing a reduction in detention staff strain and burnout. It can be a very stressful, chaotic environment to work in our detention facility, and our detention staff that is charged with maintaining the safety of our detainees have really, really appreciated the implementation of this technology. So biometric monitoring was implemented on March 19th, 2024. On only 3 days later, on March 22nd, 2024, we had a female triaged through our detention facility. She was arrested, and she was found to be intoxicated on both alcohol and drugs. She had no health complaints. She appeared otherwise healthy. She was assessed by our paramedic, and no concerns were raised. Based on the fact that she was intoxicated by drugs and alcohol, the decision was made to place her in one of our biometric monitored cells. Only 10 minutes into her custody, the biometric alarm went off, and it indicated that her respiratory rate was above the upper threshold. Our detention sergeant promptly attended to the cell, knocked on the glass. The detainee appeared to be sleeping. Based on the alarm, he had the door open. He found her to be in cardiac arrest, not breathing. CPR was applied, as well as 2 doses of Narcan. EMS attended. She lost her vital signs in the ambulance, and she was revived, and she ended up living through this incident. A life saved due to the biometrics. Only 2.5 months later, May 9th, 2024, we had a male in his 30s triaged through detention. He was sober. He had no drugs or alcohol on board. He was cooperative. He did disclose that he had heart disease and he was on numerous medications. Based on that health history, the decision was made to place him in a biometric monitored cell. 4 hours into his time in custody, an alarm went off that indicated his respiratory rate was not normal. Our detention facility paramedic promptly attended to the cell and found him in cardiac arrest, called for an AED, which our cell sergeant promptly retrieved, and the male was given 2 cycles on the AED. CPR was applied. He was revived, transported to Regina General Hospital. Doctors confirmed he suffered a heart attack, and he would have died without timely intervention. 6 months later, November 24th, 2024, police arrest an intoxicated male. They identify that he has a recent stab wound to the abdomen. They take him to the Regina General Hospital, where he's released from custody. He ends up being treated and released. The male makes his way to the brief detox unit, where he ends up causing a disturbance. Our officers are called, they reattend, and he ends up being arrested from the brief detox unit. He's taken to our detention facility. At the detention facility, he's assessed by our paramedic. His wound is rebandaged, and the decision is made to place him in a biometric monitored cell. 3 hours into his custody time, we start getting repeated biometric alarms from his cell. We attend back to the cell. He's sleeping on the floor. He's alert. He's talking to us, and he is cooperative. He says he feels fine. However, based on the fact that the alarm continued to sound and his history of injury, the decision was made to send him to hospital. Only 20 minutes later, he's in emergency surgery, having been found to be bleeding internally. Again, the biometrics system picked this up. Those face-to-face checks likely wouldn't have, and this technology likely saved his life. RPS is the first organization in Saskatchewan to implement live biometric monitoring, and simultaneous with Edmonton, the first in Canada. Since implementation, we've consulted with numerous organizations who wish to look at implementing this technology into their detention facilities. So obviously, this is a very positive update for us today, and this technology has fit very well into the 4 pillars of our strategic plan. Currently, again, 10 of our 34 cells are equipped with this technology, and it's definitely on the radar of Regina Police Service to increase the number of cells that are biometrically monitored. We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Staff Sergeant and Mr. Carlton. Thank you very much for the good work and the positive report. Does the board have any questions on this? Go ahead, Manmeet.
Though there shouldn't be and cannot be a cost applied to the life saved, but just for the understanding of people, can you tell what has been the cost incurred by RPS to implement this system?
And then the monitoring of each cell costs $100 per cell per month. So I think we can all conclude that the cost is extremely low given the benefit.
I agree. Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. I think this clearly shows the benefit of technology in various aspects of the work that we do, but especially in saving lives as we've done on numerous occasions here. So thank you for identifying the need and proposing a solution and bringing that forward and having something for the successful and being replicated across the country. So thanks again.
All right. Can I have a motion to receive and file the report, please? Thank you. I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next, we have a PO 25-12, use of force year-end 2024. Acting Chief, could you please introduce the report?
Certainly. So every quarter, we are required to report our uses of force. Just going to try that again. Every quarter, we report to the Saskatchewan Police Commission our uses of force, and then annually, we require reporting as well. And every year, we bring that report publicly to the board and to the members of our city, ensuring transparency. And so internally, we have a use of force review board who thoroughly looks at each use of force that occurs in our service. And the chair of that committee is Inspector Brad Walter. So Brad is here this morning to report on the 2024 use of force review board.
Force Review Board 2024 year-end report. I'm going to put together a slideshow here I'll take you through that'll explain a little bit about how the board functions, our reporting process, and then give you a statistical rundown of 2024's results. So the review board is made up of 7 RPS members and 1 RPA observer. The role of the board is to examine all reportable uses of force involving RPS members and to ensure adherence to federal laws, provincial standards or statutes, and internal policies. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the use of force model. This is sort of the guideline that we use when we're analyzing force, and it's the model that the officers will use to explain in their memorandum and on how they made the decision to use force. So this model's been around since approximately 2000. It was developed nationally from agencies all across Canada. Since that time, there's certain variations on the model that are used by Ontario's changed it a little bit. The RCMP have their own version, but essentially they all look the same and function the same with a few minor changes on them. So it's a graphical representation of the elements involved in use of force. It helps us understand why and in what manner an officer may respond with force. And the model promotes a continuous critical assessment throughout a situation. So the model's based on 6 principles. The number 1 is primarily it's the responsibility of peace officers to protect and preserve life. The primary objective of any use of force is to ensure public safety. Police officer safety is essential to public safety. The use of force model does not replace or augment the law. The law speaks for itself. The model reflects federal statute law and case law, but it is not intended to dictate policy to any agency, so it's a guideline. It doesn't specifically prescribe, but it guides us through responses. So when we looked at the use of force model on the last graphic, we start with the middle. In the middle of any use of force is a situation. And one of the things we have to understand is the situation is always changing and evolving. So we're continually assessing, planning, and acting, and as things unfold, we have to continually go back to assessing what information we have, what are we seeing, come up with a plan, a revised plan if things have changed, and then take actions based on that plan. And this continually changes throughout a situation. There's 6 factors affecting the situation that are in the model. Number 1 would be the environment, things such as hot or cold or extreme weather. The number of subjects an officer is facing, the perceived abilities of a subject, depending on what skill set that person is, whether they're large, violent, those kinds of things. What previous knowledge does the officer have of a subject that they're dealing with? Have they dealt with them in the past? Was there indicators in the call for service that give them information about what the person's skill set is or behavior is? The use of time and distance will also be a factor that we have to consider. Typically, time and distance are beneficial to an officer. It gives us time to make plans and assess. So depending how compressed that situation is, it might impact the options an officer has available to them. And then something that falls under subject behavior would be potential attack signs. What is the behavior and what is the person doing that would lead us to indicate whether they're going to be compliant or whether they're going to be confrontational or aggressive? So the next categories we move out on the model are the subject behaviors, and there's 5 of those. The first one is cooperative. Is the person willing to take direction and follow the instructions of the officer? Are they passive resistant, which would be where they're not doing anything to counteract the officers taking them into custody, but they're certainly not helping. So, for example, could be somebody at a protest that's just laying down and won't get up and won't cooperate. Then there's the active resistant behavior, where they're actually doing things to counteract what the officer's trying to do in order to take them into custody, but they're not being assaultive towards the officer. So something as simple as if you go to take somebody's hand to put them in handcuffs and they pull their hand away. So they're not assaultive to the officer, but they're actively doing something to be resistant to the arrest. And then assaultive, as I've spoken earlier, is where they're actually trying to harm the officer or attack the officer. And then the final and obviously most significant one is grievous bodily harm or death. As we move out into the ring of the model, perceptions and tactical considerations fall into play. So there are 2 separate factors that may affect an officer's overall assessment, and they're represented in the same area of the model. And it'll explain why 2 officers' responses may differ. Each officer is an individual and has unique perceptions, and so therefore there are many cases where one officer may respond in a certain way and another officer may respond in another way, because there's nothing that's prescribed exactly how things should be done. But basically what we have to think about in those cases is, was the officer's response reasonable? Would the average person in society think that what the officer did was reasonable and their perception was reasonable based on what they're seeing? And so these are all interrelated and graphically represented in the same area of the model. So things that could affect somebody's perception, an officer's perception, is their strength, their overall fitness or physical abilities. How much experience they have, both personally and professionally, is going to impact how they see things unfolding. What level of skills or training do they have? What fears do they have in that situation? And all officers are going to, they're human beings. They're going to have fear of a situation if it's significant. And it's basically, how do you respond around that fear? Gender would relate to size, perceptions, and how they see the world. Fatigue, is it the end of a 12-hour shift where you're mentally and physically tired? Is it the middle of the shift where you're fairly fresh? Those are all going to be factors that may impact your perception. How long, if you've been in a struggle or a fight, how long has that fight gone on? The longer that fight goes on, the more fatigue sets in, the more you have concern around whether you're going to be able to get that person under control or not. So that's going to affect your perception. Do you have any injuries, whether it's pre-existing that you brought to the call with you, or an injury that may occur in a struggle? And then a sight, your angle and point of view, your positioning in a room. what do you see from the angle you're looking at the subject or the behavior or the situation versus another angle in the room that you maybe would pick up other things, weapons or those kinds of things that might be positioned in the room that one officer might see that another officer might not see based on where they're standing. And then moving out in the ring, we get to the officer's response options. So the first one in the blue there is officer presence. So by virtue of showing up to a call, typically in a marked police car, in uniform, and then identifying yourself, you have a certain influence on people based on your perception. And so that's the first level of options for response. All cases we use communication whenever possible. We use communication to give direction. We use communication to de-escalate situations and try to calm things. That's always, kind of the first go-to is can we bring the dynamics of the situation down and calm things? Sometimes it's effective. Sometimes it's not effective. Physical control would be the next thing where we actually physically have to do something to get the situation under control. And if you look at the yellow portion of that chart, we start out with what's called soft physical control, and that's the lowest level of force where it's the least likely to inflict injury upon anybody. So things like where we use joint manipulation, where we control twist locks or wrist locks, those kinds of things where there's no dynamic like striking force. It's more about leverage and controlling the body. And then we move up into hard physical control, which could be things like strikes, kicks, those kinds of things. Moving up into the orange is the intermediate weapons, so things like the conducted energy weapon, the baton, those kinds of things that we would use as the behavior increases. If you kind of contrast where these colors fit with the gray on your chart, you can see the subject, as the subject behavior escalates, it kind of opens up the potential options that we would consider using. So for example, if we're going to be using intermediate weapons, very likely we're at a high level of active resistance or assaultive behavior, maybe into the grievous bodily harm or death, although it's not the ideal response, but it may fit the situation. And then ultimately, lethal force is the last option available, and that again coincides with a very high level of risk to the officer or the public, and that would be grievous bodily harm or death, where something very significant is happening and we have to stop it immediately. So, as Acting Chief Davies mentioned, we report quarterly and annually to the Saskatchewan Police Commission. We're mandated to provide a statistical update on the use of force for them to review. And we also report, as we are now, to the board once a year. So just to get a little bit of an understanding of how we report and how we categorize things, if we go out to take a call for service or we're involved in I'll call it an event, one event, one situation, it could have multiple uses of force involved in it. So for example, you may go to arrest an assaultive person and it's in a compressed environment and we have to resort to physical strikes immediately, but maybe that person's either just so strong or under the influence of drugs or alcohol that the physical strikes just aren't effective. And maybe the officers have to transition now to a conducted energy weapon to try to get control, but the person's wearing a thick, heavy jacket in the winter and the conducted energy weapon does not have the effect that we need. And so then and maybe they flee. So we have to send our canine dog to do an apprehension. So that's one event, one incident that we're attending, but within that one incident, there could be more than one use of force, I guess is really what that example is trying to show. So what happens when force is used by an officer? Immediately it needs to be reported to their field supervisor. The field supervisor is in charge of doing a review of that incident. They collect memorandums from all of the officers involved. Any video that's available out there, whether it's in-car camera, whether it's surveillance within the neighborhood, whatever we can get to gives us a bit of an understanding of the situation, that would be gathered. Photographs are taken if it's significant of the scene, if it's for injuries of either maybe the officer or the subject, that's gathered. and then any other information that's available, whether it's witness statements or people that observe things, et cetera. And that field supervisor then takes that package and does a critique of it, and they review it, and they provide an opinion as to whether the force was reasonable, and they have to articulate why they feel that way. And they come up with, if there is any corrective action that they see, they put that into their memo as well. And if they've spoken with the officer about things they could have done better, that goes into there as well as part of that corrective action. The package is then forwarded up through the chain of command, layer by layer, and it gets to the review board. We then take it and we examine every one of the packages. Once we've done that individually to form our own understanding, we then convene typically 4 or 5 meetings a year to review all of the packages quarterly. And we will discuss it as a group and make sure that we're all seeing it, in a similar fashion, or if there's some things that maybe one person identified that others maybe didn't pick up on. And then we take up follow-up action when necessary. So if there's something that we see that we feel could be improved through some coaching and the NCO, that the field supervisor didn't do it, then we will prescribe either one of the board members or direct one of the board members or the field supervisor to go back and take up some of that follow-up action, whether it's counseling, could be training, it could be other things. When we're done reviewing the package, we have to assign it to one of 4 levels. So a level 1, which is typically what we see, is that the force used was appropriate for the situation and it was compliant with policy. So everything that was done there makes sense, it's reasonable, and it complies with policy, and we feel that things were done properly. A level 2 finding would be that the force was appropriate for the situation, but maybe there's some things that weren't fully compliant with policy, or there's some tactical things that could have been done maybe a little bit better that would maybe have prevented some things or decreased risk to both the officer and the subject they were dealing with. So that's things along coaching and training. So we would direct those things back to the appropriate party to do that, whether it's the field supervisor or sometimes we'll get our HR training and development unit involved. Level 3 is we feel that the force was inappropriate, but it was not a criminal situation. There was no criminal intent. So that's where we would recommend something along the lines of remedial or disciplinary action. And I'll talk a little bit more about how level 3s are handled here in a minute. And then ultimately level 4, which is one we don't see very often, very rarely, but we have had one in the past for sure. That's where the force is inappropriate and we feel that it's excessive and that there's potential for criminal charges. And I'll talk about that process a little bit as well in a moment. But don't see a lot of those, but we certainly, we would push any concerns we have up through the chain to have them addressed. Actually, I'll back up one. I guess I don't have that slide in here. So level 3s and level 4s, if we find a level 3 or a level 4, we put together a package and that's forwarded up to the chief and the deputies. They review that and they'll make a decision based on what our findings are to have our professional standards unit involved in doing an investigation. And then professional standards would go through an entire investigation, interviewing people, bringing people in from the public that were either witnesses or the subject of the force. And they would put a package together and a recommendation together, and that would go over to the Crown Prosecutor's Office on a level 4 for contemplation of whether charges should be forthcoming or not. A level 3 would not be forwarded outside of the organization, but it would go up through to the chief with some recommendations around maybe what type of remedial or what type of training or what type of disciplinary action would be appropriate. So these things are forwarded to a very high level within the organization and taken very seriously. So what happened in 2024? Well, 2024, we had a little bit of an increase in the use of force events. In 2023, there was 160, and in 2024, we went up by 12. So a 7.5% increase. Our separate uses of forces in those events went from 249 to 264, so a 6% increase. Those are not anything from the board's perspective, the Use of Force Review Board's perspective, that are alarming or concerning. We have fluctuations from year to year based on the number of incidents, and we can see both incidents and uses of force increased. We have another line there called the restraint chair. And typically from 2023, I've been on the board for probably 3 or 4 years and quite a bit previous to that. We typically had around 8 or 9 uses of force, restraint chair uses a year. In 2024, we had 23. So a couple of factors. So I'll just cover what the restraint chair is. The restraint chair is when somebody's brought into detention that is under the influence of alcohol or drugs and their behavior is escalated, and they will either demonstrate maybe self-harm, where they're going to hurt themselves, or they're going to do damage to the cell block area, the cell that they're in. We have a chair that we use that's a restraint chair where they're confined till they calm down. It's helped a lot of people as far as from injuring themselves, and it doesn't get used a whole lot. Last year, there's a couple reasons that we went up to 2023. One would be just the factor of what behaviors were being exhibited when people were brought into detention. Really just nothing we can control. We also had some different NCOs in there, and their perceptions and their objectives for controlling people would have varied maybe a little bit from their predecessors. Again, nothing alarming. Each one of those incidents is documented. They have to videos pulled on it so we can watch the video to see why they were put in the restraint chair, what their behaviors were. They have to document through the watch commander who runs the shift. The sergeant has to advise them that this is going to occur, that anything over a 2-hour time period, they have to consult with the watch commander to determine if the behaviors are still escalated and they need to remain in the chair. So everything's documented by time. The person in the restraint chair is checked on just like in the cell every 15 minutes. They're monitored very closely. So it's a safe way of trying to settle the person's behavior and ensure that they don't have self-harm or hurt, destructive behavior. So we look at the frequency of use of force in 2024. So as I said earlier, we went to 172 events, 264 uses of force occurred in there. When you look at the overall number of contacts that the Regina Police Service has with the public, we attended 59,080 calls last year, and that's just a patrol number, frontline number for patrol where we have contacts, and it does not include all of the other contacts that plainclothes units would have, school resources, et cetera. So that's just from a patrol perspective. So we had a 0.45% rate of use of force based on the number of contacts. So a significant number of contacts never ever result in anything more than an interaction. How did we classify or categorize our use of force last year? Well, the vast majority of them are 242 of them were classified as level 1, so that's where use of force is appropriate and adhered to policy. We had 18 where we did appropriate use of force, but there were some things that could be coached or done a little bit better, so 18 of those occurred. We had 4 level 3s where we felt that the force was inappropriate, but there was nothing criminal or vindictive on the officer's behalf. It was more around education and understanding and learning. So we implemented some training on 4 of those cases to improve their understanding and approach to situations. And we had 0 level 4s last year. One of the big ones that we talk about each year is canine arrests, so the utilization of our canine dogs. In 2024, there was 149 canine arrests where the dog was involved. Of those 149 times that the dog was involved, 34 of them resulted in an actual contact or bite, which is 23% of those arrests occurred in a bite. And those would be significant events around subjects fleeing a scene of a crime, and they would do searches or apprehensions by directing their dog. That is not an unusual number for us. It's fairly significant with what we've seen in the past. Canine members did attend 4,790 calls for service in 2024 and only brought their dog into the event 149 times. So very low number. It's not a matter of if the dog shows up, there's going to be a bite or a contact. They use very high level of discretion as to when that dog is utilized, and it's only utilized when necessary. And of those canine deployments, 31 of them were level 1s, and 3 of them were level 2. So again, force appropriate on 3 of them. The dog supervisor reviews. They review all of the canine deployments. There was 3 times there where they felt there could have been a little bit of a tweak or coaching on how the dog could be implemented better, but every time the force was appropriate. So again, trying to improve our response through critique. So having said all that, our goal as a Use of Force Review Board and as an organization is to continually improve. We're striving to improve always. So we utilize coaching and feedback to try to achieve that. For the last several years, we're seeing a really good uptake on our field supervisors for implementing coaching and feedback to our members. And what we find is, historically, 10, 15 years ago, the changes or the recommendation of the coaching wouldn't occur until it got to the board level, which could sometimes be a couple of months till we get to review the file. And so now we have the field supervisors doing that critique and that coaching immediately after, and it helps us improve our members' response and performance, because it's helping to educate them about what they can do better, rather than waiting for it to go to the board and then come back several months later. And our goal is to improve the understanding of the appropriate application of force for our members. And we spend a lot of time working on not only from the board perspective, but from our training perspective in our block training, trying to continually increase the appropriate understanding of what's an appropriate level of force. Continually work on training with improving perception and assessment. Those would be things around scenario-based training. Anything that we can do to make it lifelike and realistic as possible is what we're doing. And we spend a significant amount of time on de-escalation training through communication. That's all built into the scenarios that are presented by our training and development unit. We train worst case scenarios, but we don't just focus on worst case scenarios. We also focus on situations that are resolvable if you come in and use communication and dialogue and de-escalation. So it doesn't always mean every time you go into a training scenario that you're going to be at a high level. You have to kind of figure that out as you go through the scenario, and it's very effective for helping our officers when they're communicating out in the public. And then through our report writing, the last thing is our report writing is our members do a really, really good job of articulating what their perceptions were, why they use the force, what the subject behaviors are. They have a bit of a guideline to follow, and they're doing an exceptional job in helping us as a board understand what were they thinking, what were they seeing, and why did they use the force. So in conclusion, our events in 2024, there was an increase of 7.5% in the actual events we attended, a 6% increase in the actual separate uses of force. Throughout all that, though, we maintained a very high percentage of use of force in level 1 and level 2 categories. 92% were level 1, 7% were level 2. So we are at 99% of all use of force is falling in the appropriate use of force categories. And then we assured accountability for our membership by dealing with ones that fell outside that appropriate level. We had 3 level 3s, and we addressed that through significant training with those members. And we had 0 level 4s. And that's all I have for today. If there's any questions, I'd be more than glad to answer any questions you have.
Good.
Awesome. Thank you for the presentation and the transparency. Just out of curiosity for the canine, is it dog training or handler training, or a combination of both for when it goes
I'm not a canine expert, but we have those on our board. But it's a combination of both, right? The dog, what they look for, and when the NCO reviews it, what they look for is, did the dog respond as trained, like that, appropriately to how they're trained? Are they doing things that they're supposed to do, or are they doing things that they're wanting to do? And so they look at that, and then they also look at the decision making by the handler, because every situation is unique, so there's no prescriptive way of doing it. So they'll look at things that the handler's doing and the decisions they're making, and try to work on improving that as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Brad, thank you very much for this report. You have indicated, and so is Chief, that Saskatchewan Police Commission gets the reporting for this. For a member of general public, what would be your message about why the use of force is applied? What are you talked about a little bit more on, but in a more of a citizen view, What would be your thought on that? Like especially the level 3s and 4s.
Right.
You know, you talked about the training and the internal processes, but this is very, I would say, citizen-facing
Right.
activity, right?
Right.
So, how would you summarize this in overall picture?
I think very simply, the goal of any police officer when they go into a situation is to establish control. That's really all we're looking for. So it really depends. It's very much subject dependent. So if a person's compliant and willing to listen to direction, other than putting handcuffs on, that's really the only control that would be, if there's an arrest, would be the only control that's required. So it's all based on, again, as we talked about in the model, it's all based on what subject behaviors are we seeing, what's the situation, what are the perceptions. So really, it's all about us establishing control, and hopefully we can do that through verbal dialogue and compliance. But oftentimes people are emotionally charged, they're under the influence of alcohol and drugs, they're not their normal self or thinking like they normally would, and they're making decisions that escalate the behavior. And so the officer's goal when they go in is to get control in the safest, least harmful manner as possible. Again, we talk about, you know, soft physical control versus hard physical. If we can do it in a way where we lower the risk of injury, that would be how we would approach it. But ultimately, it's subject behavior dependent, so that the person involved is really driving where it goes, and the officers aren't there to inflict physical force on anyone. They're there to establish control. Sometimes that requires the use of force to establish that. And the control is to protect everybody. You know, we have concerns when we go into a situation. We have concerns around the public. We have concerns around police officer safety. And we also have concerns around the subject safety as well. Right? We factor all of those things in. But because the subject behavior drives the situation, and they have actually the most decision-making power out of anybody there based on what they decide to do, we put the public first, the officer safety next, and then the subject safety third.
Thank you.
Commissioner, if I can just add in a quick comment there. I think Inspector Walter summed it up very succinctly. But, you know, there is sort of that, well, it's police investigating police. The members of the review board take their role very seriously. And you can see if there is an opportunity for us to either provide better coaching, training, or if it is at the threshold of discipline, we're certainly willing and want to go there. We want all of our members to be doing the best job that they can for the members of this city. And so if there was a situation that didn't go exactly as it should, we want to correct that, nip that in the bud, and ensure that we're headed in the right direction going forward. And then further, the Saskatchewan Serious Incident Response Team, anytime there is a serious injury because of a use of force or a police interaction, they are notified immediately. So in those situations, they will come in, they will do the investigation, and they will have recommendations in those cases. And so if there is, like I said, that serious injury and it meets the threshold under the law, then they will come in and do those investigations as well.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, sorry if I can add as well. Brad touched on it, but the board is comprised of subject matter experts, people who have a depth of experience in canine, defensive tactics, physical control, and firearms. So they view it with a critical lens, and I'd like to highlight that it's not like the old days of sergeant rolling up, checking to see if everybody was okay and carrying on, that they do a really good job of looking at it critically. You can see with the results of the categories 2s and 3, but the SMEs, the subject matter experts, are all part of this review committee.
I think the other part of it is that this is not just going to be a one-time thing. This is an ongoing process, as you indicated. I think for the general public, it is important for them to recognize, as you said, Brad, that it's not of safety of just for the individual that is part of that situation, but it is also the safety of the officers as well. Yep. Right?
Yes.
Okay, well, anyone else have a question? Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Brad. Thanks for the presentation. Good to see you again. Great that we're a data-driven organization, and we've got a number of years of use of force, for example, statistics. My brain is asking me, compared to what? So that leads me to ask, do we have stats for other police forces? That would also lead me to ask, do they gather the data in the same way? Do they ask the same questions we do? Do they use the exact same force circle that we use.
Yeah, so a couple things on that. The use of force model, again, it was national across Canada, and then some other agencies modified it a little bit.
Yeah.
Ontario's got a few things around de-escalation written right into the model. The RCMP they're almost identical. They just look a little bit different. They're just modified to fit their organization or their vocabulary. So yes, we all use the same type of review process as far as the model that's involved in assessing use of force, or very similar models. As far as the review process, that I don't know exactly. I've worked a little bit with Saskatoon and a couple other agencies, and I would say ours is probably as involved as anybody's, if not more so. I know historically, back in the early 2000s when this was all established, the model, and that I was just starting my career and starting as a use of force instructor, and I do know that the process Regina had in place was bar none ahead of most organizations. So I don't know if other organizations have caught up, if you will, or changed what they do, but we run a very, very diligent review. I sat in on a video conference for the Justice Institute of BC in April, and also they talked a little bit about some stats. I think it was Vancouver or Calgary. And what was really interesting is the person presenting on that panel, they had they brought up same numbers of calls for service versus police interactions, and it was almost identical to ours. So I found that really interesting. So I think we are on par with the rest of Canada, if not better. But I don't have anything specific to lay out for you to say it's exactly this way. But those are the impressions we're getting. And again, we hold our members to a very high standard. As Deputy Steve Lee said, the people on our panel are experienced members who have a history and an understanding of use of force, whether it's from the canine perspective or from just from the basic use of force instruction. So we hold our members very, very accountable.
I would add, Commissioner, the Police Commission publishes a report every year based on use of force that has the provincial data in there. And sometimes they will make recommendations if they're seeing something that seems to be trending in a direction they don't like. They will provide some recommendations or some, hey, watch out for this. And that is published publicly every year as well.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right. Seeing none, hearing none, can I have a motion to receive and file the report, please? Thank you. I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right, the next report is PO 25-13. Chief, could you please introduce the report?
Absolutely. So every year at this time, we bring our first reporting financially to the public in terms of how things are looking for our year for 2025 for our financial picture. And so Ms. Tracy Raisin, who is our Manager of Financial Services, will provide us with the report up until the end of April 2025.
All right, good morning. So before I begin my presentation, I thought I would provide a little bit of background in regards to our variance reporting, as we have a new member to the board. So welcome. So variance is the difference between the budget and the actuals, and the process of financial management at RPS basically entails me running a report every month, every expense account code and every revenue account code, and then I go through them line by line every month to see if we have any issues. So it takes dedicated time and obviously attention to detail, but I think it's extremely important. So I then provide these financial monthly reports to our staff that have financial responsibility and work with them in regards to managing our variance. So this will help forecast for the remainder of the year. So for example, if we determine that the price of fuel has increased, I will forecast a deficit in that budget account code line, but then I work with them to try to find another line where we can find a reduction. And this ensures I have a balanced budget at the end of the year. So moving on to the report. This is the budget variance as of April 30th. So I'll begin with the operating budget. That's the first attachment. So 33% of the year is now complete and 32% of our operating budget has been spent. So we're on track. I'm currently projecting a small surplus of around 230,000, and really that surplus is coming from some different provincial funding that we received, which is just cost recovery on our salaries that we already paid. In regards to overtime, we had an increase. There's a separate line for cost recovered overtime. So what this is our officers are sometimes called to assist another police agency on an investigation. So for example, the RCMP, and then I'm able to basically invoice them back to cost recover the cost. So that's why that line shows a variance there, but in a good way. In regards to our capital budget, so capital budget actually has 6 different categories of capital programs, and this is the same and similar with the city. So our categories include asset management, communications, emergency services equipment, facilities, fleet, and IT. Some highlights of our capital programs include ongoing replacement of our emergency equipment, IT hardware and software, and even our patrol radios. So for the majority, things are just ongoing replacements. So currently the forecast for all of our capital budgets are still currently on budget. And that concludes my variance for April. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tracy. I'll ask the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
So can I have a motion to receive and file the report? Thank you. I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed? Hearing none, seeing none, carried. Well, the next report is the PO 25-14, monthly crime statistics. Chief, could you please introduce the report?
You bet. So I would say April is continuing our trend in mostly a really good way. So we saw a year-to-date decrease of 12.6% of crimes against the person, and crimes against the property saw a decrease of 13.7%. So that has resulted in an overall decrease in terms of our crimes. Robberies are also decreased 9.7%, assaults are down 22%, and break and enters are down 29.7%. The one area we're obviously continuing to monitor and work on is in relation to arsons, where we saw an increase of 12.8% so far. And we do have a report coming to the private session later on this morning to discuss that in more detail. And hopefully we can have a fulsome discussion around maybe some things that we can do to try and have that trending in a good direction. And some other highlights, we've had 90 admissions to the Complex Needs Emergency Shelter in April, which is a good number. Camera registry, we're currently at 408 cameras, so that number is steadily increasing, so that's, again, a really good thing. Just to highlight, last week we held our annual stakeholder breakfast. I know a number of our board members were there. Fantastic event where we had probably about 100 people in the room and really asked for their feedback on what are we doing well and what could we be doing differently or better. And so really great conversation. Our analysis unit is going to take all that information that we heard, put together a report for us, and our senior management team will be getting together in the next few weeks to determine if there are some budget implications as we work towards building our 26-27 budget, or if there are some things that we can work towards based on what we heard from the community. So always a fantastic event. Speaking of fantastic events, tomorrow actually is our all out for the month of May. We're going to be in the Arcola East neighborhood, Adams 102, 103, 147, and 148. So we will be seeing a significant presence out there in terms of traffic, which we know is always a little bit of an issue. So we'll be seeing some additional folks out there tomorrow. In addition, we will also be talking to people about the camera registry and Community On in terms of getting some of that proactive work happening as well. And just want to note before I close off my report that Mr. Les Parker, who you've seen wandering around here today, getting all of our IT ready, ensuring that we're streaming, is actually leaving the RPS. He's off to another opportunity, but he's been with us since 2012, and certainly just want to acknowledge all of his hard work and dedication to the Regina Police Service, and I'm sure he's in the back. But just wanted to say thanks and to acknowledge him, and certainly wish him all the best of luck as he moves on to other opportunities. So that concludes my report, but certainly happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. I want to commend RPS for the ongoing good work. Notably, I saw that in the media that on May 20th, there was 2 kilograms of meth and some other drugs that were apprehended. I think this has been a great year. While I always say that there's going to be more work to do, but this is a good thing for our safety of our citizens. So truly appreciating all the, not just you, but the whole team. I know it's a lot of sweat and tears that goes into it. So really appreciate that. So I will open up to the board for any further questions. All right, well, looks like we, so can I have a motion to receive and file the report, please? Thank you, Robert. I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, hearing none, carried. All right, we'll have the resolution for the private session. So can I have a resolution for that? Thank you, George. I will call the question. Anyone opposed? All right, we'll recess for 20 minutes.